You'll speak a little bit later on, and I figured I'll have Stacy introduce herself if you all aren't already familiar with who she is and the wonderful work she does. Let's see. So yeah, let's see. Is the screen share still up? Or yeah, okay. It looks different on my end now. All right, I think we're good to go. So I was saying in those roles, I have really just seen how much it can help for everyone, institutions, partners, funders, for everyone to really be on the same page about impacts and impact reporting. So I want to take you through a presentation that's going to hit a lot of different bases. We're going to talk about briefly why impact reporting is important. I'll provide you with some general tips for how to write strong impact statements. And I know some of you may be charged with some of the impact reporting tasks yourselves. And these tips should help you write those impact statements or reports more effectively, more efficiently. But I think these tips are also going to be helpful even if you are not the one writing impact statements. The presentation should also help you identify strong ones and give you some ideas for how to use and share or leverage impact statements. And you'll gain some information and resources that you can pass on to communicators, to your research and extension faculty and directors, and others. And then I'll also share some tips for how to engage with the National Land Grant Impacts Database, as well as just a little bit about my multi-state research materials, because I think those are existing resources and platforms that you can leverage to promote your institutions. And again, if we're all on the same page, I think it really helps streamline our efforts and amp them up. So we have a bit to go through. And as I said, I want to start out with making sure we're all on the same page about what impact means. So in the context of reporting, impact describes a change, and that can be a change in knowledge, behavior, or condition. And then a change in condition can be broken down further into economic condition, environmental condition, or social condition, which is things like improved community resilience or health or well-being, things like that. And all of these different types of changes can occur at the level of the individual, the family, the state, the nation, the world, really, or anything in between. The key is just a change. Impact is change. So then an impact statement is just a brief summary of a project or program and the difference it has made. You can think about an impact statement answering the questions, so what and who cares? So why is impact reporting important? Why do we bother with reporting? Documenting the impacts of your projects and programs is usually required. So one could say that we do it because we have to. Not reporting impacts can affect, eligibility for grants, for awards, and other things like that. But there's so much more to it than that. Impact reporting provides accountability, especially publicly funded projects or institutions really have a responsibility to share what they're doing in a way that the public can understand and access. Beyond that, impact reporting shows a return on investment and describes the difference that your projects and programs are making, which can help generate interest and support, maybe in the form of new partnerships or funding. It could also even help with recruiting students or attracting new faculty or scientists or even program participants. Impact reporting is really important because impact is what's going to help catch people's attention, even if they're not experts in that field, and even if they don't have a lot of time to dig into the details of the work. An impact statement can really entice someone to read more or learn more But even if they don't, they'll still come away with the gist of what was accomplished and why that matters. So impact statements are sought after or required by or received by many different audiences. That includes your grantors, funders, institution leadership. Others who might be interested in impacts are elected officials, policymakers, the media, even NGOs or nonprofits or industry groups in that field, as well as local communities and the general public. It's important to share impacts with all of these folks because they are involved in decisions that affect projects and programs, or they are the ones being affected by the work. Impact statements are really versatile. They can be used in a lot of different ways on many different platforms. One basic way that most of us use impact statements is submitting them to databases. I bet a lot of us are very familiar with submitting to the NIFA reporting system. You might also already be submitting to databases like the National Land Grant Impacts Database. Your institutions also likely have either internal or public-facing databases or websites that collect impact statements. Here's a nice example of a research impact page with some reports from Penn State. Or another example of an impact website from Cornell. Your university might also be sharing impact stories on like a news site or a news page, like UMaine does here. Your campus is probably also including impact stories in publications, like this magazine of impacts from UConn. And then beyond your institution, impact statements can make great pitches or press releases. They can really make great outlines or jumping off points for articles for local or national newspapers, or industry publications, different types of magazines. Impact statements can be shared with policymakers or elected officials to educate them about issues, about your projects and programs and impacts. They show your return on investment and show that your institution is an innovator or a leader in a certain field and that you're making a difference. Funding agencies like NIFA use impact statements all the time in all different sorts of products, all the different reports that they issue. They include impact statements and stories in their newsletters and in their web stories, which all have a pretty big, broad audience. The USDA NIFA communications team also frequently uses impact statements to develop talking points for the secretary's speeches and town halls. And that's a really big public audience. Impact statements are also really easy to adapt and use on social media. And then they can also just be formatted and used as handouts or leave behinds at different meetings or conferences. A great way to show off the work that your institution is doing and the impact it's having. So impact statements are really versatile. I hope those examples help illustrate that. And impact reporting, again, really works best when leadership, administrators, evaluators, communicators, and faculty are all working together at institutions and then coordinating with partners and funders. And then having a solid impact statement in a report or database is a good first step. And then beyond that, there will likely be some other people or other steps involved in adapting and sharing that original impact statement for specific platforms or audiences. I'm going to share some tips about what makes kind of that good basic impact statement for a report or a database. So in general, good impact statements are concise, clear and focused. They don't need to share every single thing. Impact statements are sort of just the highlights. Good impact statements are written for a general audience. So they're not technical or academic writing. It's not being submitted to a peer-reviewed publication. They don't need to use that sort of technical academic style of writing. In particular, definitely don't use jargon. That means avoiding technical terms, abbreviations, acronyms. And then try to use an active voice. That's just a really simple way to eliminate unnecessary phrases and make the writing a little bit easier to follow. Passive voice tends to sound really technical or academic. It can be a little bit confusing to lay readers. So just use active voice. That's simply ordering a sentence to say who did what. And it just makes sentences clear and a little bit more engaging. And then impact statements, you should think about making sure that they stand on their own. So they should tell a complete story. Again, not every detail, but they should have enough context so that a reader can understand and remember the work and its importance. Impact statements need to connect the dots and show the bigger picture. A good way to think about an impact story is a flow between issue, action, findings and outputs, and impact. So don't get too hung up on the exact terms. Some reports will use slightly different terms, but really the basic pieces and principles are always going to be the same for impact statements or impact reports. So thinking about issue, an impact statement is just going to lay out what the issue is, why it's an issue, and for whom it's an issue. Pretty straightforward. For action, good impact statements just highlight the major activities that helped achieve project impacts. Remember, you're writing for non-expert audiences, so don't go on and on about theory or methods. That said, this is a good place of an impact statement or report to mention if the researchers used, a super innovative method or tool. Maybe it's the first of its kind, or it's only available at a lab at your institution. That is something you could point out that could help the work stand out, but keep it simple and focus on why it makes the work special. It's also important when you're talking about action or response to make sure it's clear who was involved and who did the work, even who funded it. This is going to help readers know where to direct follow-up or support. And if partners and funders are named in the impact statement, those entities are more likely to share it or use it, which helps broaden its reach. Outputs are things like findings from a research study, publications, workshops, any new tools or products that were developed. You don't need to list every output or a bunch of data in an impact statement. Impact statements just focus on the major ones that were used or that led to change. And then, of course, we want to make sure that our impact statements are focusing on impact. What kind of impact did the work have? Who was impacted? Who is using those findings or those outputs? Where and when did the impact take place? And then how big was the impact? Impact statements are a lot stronger if you can use numbers that show the value or the magnitude and scale of the work. Often reports or reporting systems will ask you to share societal impacts or the public value of the work. Remember, I said that impacts can occur at many different levels, including, the individual or a study site. Public value statements go beyond a specific site or a particular group. and explain why the research matters to the general public or a broader area. Ideally, the impact statements should be reporting observed, measured changes, but we realize that there's a lot of different reasons why that might be difficult. So if those concrete impacts, those measured impacts aren't available, you can describe potential impacts in your statements. So describe how the project is taking first steps toward impact. Explain who will potentially use the findings, outputs down the line. Or you could show how small changes have potential to build and spread into bigger impacts over time. Think about like a ripple effect. When talking about potential impacts, make sure to use language that clearly shows it's a prediction, not an observation. Phrases like, if that happens, then this could happen. Just a way to really make sure readers know you're not talking about something that has happened, you're talking about something that could happen. It can also help to briefly show how that potential impact was estimated or calculated. And then when possible, share updates on progress toward impact in subsequent reports. A lot of these databases like NRS and NIDB, you're submitting to year after year. So that's a great way to kind of track your progress toward impact. Also, impact statements can share qualitative data, things like anecdotes or success stories to make the work and its impacts more relatable. Make sure you're picking anecdotes that describe a change in attitude, behavior, or condition. And it does always help to kind of back it up with some harder data or to suggest how that anecdote could be replicated or spread to others. I also want to remind you that a really great way to make impact reporting less tricky is to plan ahead. That means doing whatever you can do to make sure that impact measuring and reporting is built into project proposals, that it's built into the workflow and meetings, and making sure that faculty and communicators and leadership are all on the same page about what impact reporting is required, and any timelines or processes and forms and things like that. Just a few tips about formatting impact statements. Sometimes you won't have a lot of guidance. I know we are going to talk about the NIDB and that specific format, but sometimes you'll be writing kind of free-form impact statements. So in that case, I think some good things to consider, is just outlining the parts of the story kind of based on that wheel that I showed you. Some good rules of thumb, maybe 2 to 3 sentences per section. Really try to shoot for half a page or less. Think of an impact statement like just a nice paragraph. Maybe you could go a full page if it's a really complex project, or if you're using like a really nice template or layout. Think about using, headings and formatting and bullets to break up and organize the report, draw attention to different information. Really think about what information needs to be in an impact statement and what information can be shared as a hyperlink or an attachment or a supplement to the statement. And remember to take advantage of free templates. There's all sorts of things in Google Docs and Microsoft Word and PowerPoint, or free online tools like Canva. Simple tools like that can help you format an impact statement or an impact report and kind of give it a boost and help it kind of stand above the rest. So some reporting systems will provide a template or a very structured format for your impact statements. So I wanted to go through 2 common ones that you're probably using. First, I'm just going to mention a couple things about the NIFA reporting system, specifically the result reports, which are required for many projects, especially capacity funded projects, every year, I think. And so NIFA defines results as demonstrated achievements or changes in knowledge, behavior, or conditions. So in other words, they're talking about impacts, right? Those are the same kind of words we use to describe impact. So when you see results reports, think impact reports. And these result reports really do line up nicely with that outline and the principles that I just shared. They ask 4 key questions about the issue, about the major activities, and then about how the target audience benefited, and then how the broader public benefited. So they do ask about that sort of public value. All sections should be written with non-technical language and be less than 8,000 characters. So again, we're seeing those principles of impact statements, short, no jargon, things like that. And then I also wanted to mention that the results reports do have an option to indicate if there are no significant results to report. But if you check that box, you will be required to share comments to explain the project status. They'll want to make sure that, you're still making some progress. So remember, especially when you're reporting on projects in their early years, or maybe more foundational types of research, remember to really think about and talk about potential impacts. I think that can really help in those cases, especially. So now we're going to dig into the National Land Grant Impacts Database, kind of look at how that outline and those principles that I shared apply to this specific database and format. I believe quite a few of your institutions are already using it. If you're not, maybe you've heard about it, hopefully, but aren't quite sure what it is or how to use it. And the idea behind it is really not to give you more things to keep track of or more things to do. It's really to take advantage of and leverage existing stories and platforms. So the NIDB is a publicly accessible repository for impact statements from any land grant university. So the URL is just landgrantimpacts.org. The database has been around for quite a while, but it's very recently under new management by the APLU, and it will be getting some upgrades to make it easier to use and improve the look and feel. So if you have been using it for the past few years, stay tuned. You probably know a few things that would make it easier to use, and those are coming. So if you're not super familiar with the NIDB, there are a few qualities that I think really help understand its importance and its utility. So because it focuses on impact, it's not cluttered up with things like project proposals or technical reports and kind of all those other documents that might make it harder to find the impacts, which are really, kind of like nuggets of gold. The NIDB makes those impact statements available to anyone 24/7. It includes all land grants, and it covers both research and extension. And it includes projects from all funding sources, so not just NIFA. And this really sets it apart from the NIFA reporting portal or your individual institution's databases. I know it's not fun to upload impact statements to a bunch of different databases, but as you saw, most impact statements follow a pretty similar format. So in my experience, it's pretty quick and easy to copy and paste an impact statement into the different databases. You might just need to make a few simple tweaks. Another important feature of the NIDB is that it provides a little bit of quality control. Only authorized users assigned by your institution can input impact statements. So let's look at how to do that. First, if you aren't sure who your assigned inputter is, or if you want to add or change your inputters, you can contact Andrea Putman and Kim Scotto at APLU. This is their AdCom's email address. They both should have access to that inbox. And then think about assigning maybe 1 to 2 inputters per institution. Ideally, these would be folks like communicators, maybe evaluators. It could be administrators, especially if you've completed an impact training. And then remember to get, your dean or director's approval. So now I'm going to switch over and kind of demo what that looks like for logging in and inputting statements. So you can input anytime, and to enter to input, for right now, you scroll to the bottom and hit enter the database. And then it kind of brings up this page, which is the search page. And you need to click over to the tab that says log in. Then you have to log in. Give me a minute to type in my credentials. And then it brings up this My Impacts page, which is where you will see a list of all the impact statements you've submitted. Mine looks a little funky because I have some additional privileges to see other impact statements. Yours will be a little bit different. To add a statement, there's an Add Statement button. Click and it'll have a little drop-down menu. For me, it says Research National because that's the type of impact statements I'm submitting. For you all, it will likely either say Research or Extension, or you might have both options if you're inputting for both. So you just pick the appropriate one for the impact statement. And then it pulls up the form, and the form is the same for all inputters. And you can see that the sections are very similar to what we just went through: title, relevance, response, results, public value statement. And within those text boxes, there's not currently really any formatting you can do, but that is something that the database team is working on. So right now it's just kind of a string of characters, just a few sentences per box is a good rule of thumb. Beyond those text boxes, there are different drop downs and things to check that are going to help categorize the impact statement. So focus area, select one of those. You can select some more specific tags about the different topics the impact statement covers. It's especially important to select the funding source. And again, you can see on this drop-down menu, there's state appropriation, county funding, things that are not NIFA. So it should be a pretty extensive list of the different types of funding that your projects and programs might receive. It's also important to list a point of contact. That could be the submitter, or if you want it to be maybe the researcher or extension educator involved in the project, you could add their information there. Another important one to consider using is resource links. This is a great place where you can attach the URL to maybe the program website or a supplemental resource like a technical paper about the project, something to provide additional details. It could even be a link to some photos to go with the story. And then down at the bottom, there's a few different save and submit options. And that's pretty much it. So again, you can see kind of how it aligns with those basic, the basic outline for an impact statement and those basic principles. So that's inputting statements. I do want to briefly show you what it looks like to search. So we're going to go back to this main page, just landgrantimpacts.org. And you can search the impact database by clicking the search impacts tab. Right now you have to kind of go click again, and then it pulls up the database. And on the left, you're going to have a lot of different filters, a lot of different ways to narrow down and filter your search. So let's say we want to look at Northeastern region impacts, maybe Connecticut, and let's look at research because that's what I'm more familiar with. So you can see it was kind of updating on the right over here. And we have a nice list of impact statements, which is kind of a nice list of what's going on at the Connecticut Ag Experiment Station. If you click on one of these, you can see they've filled it out. You know, a couple of sentences kind of per section. All the sections are filled out. They didn't provide any resource links, but we have a person to follow up with. We see the funding, all that good stuff. One important part is this copy direct link button. That is the way that you are going to share a URL to a particular statement. You can't just copy up here where it says search. That's just going to go to the generic search page. If you want to share a URL that goes directly to a specific statement, you need to click copy direct link, and that will copy that specific URL, and you can paste it into an email, to a social media post, wherever you want to share it. It's a little, you know, that's not super intuitive, but that's the way it works for now. Let's see what else to show you. In addition to the impact statements that are actually in the database, there are some prepared materials available on the website. Go to the emphasis areas tab, you'll see that we have a bunch of impact summaries and stories. So these are materials that are developed by a team of communicators at the beginning of each year. They are based on the impact statements submitted to the database within the last year. And we house them by sort of focus area. So if, for example, environmental stewardship, you can see that there's a variety of different summaries and stories. So a story is just kind of a simple blog post about an impact statement. And then a summary is a little more complex. It features work by multiple different institutions addressing the same issue. So in 2024, we are hoping to kind of present these materials on the website in a more visually appealing way, probably something more like a blog. But for now, last year's are kind of archived here in this way. And these materials are distributed kind of in a few different ways into some different key stakeholders, including the CARET reps for your institution. And they're used by partners like NIFA and APLU throughout the year in those different newsletters and blogs and reports that I showed you earlier. If you want your impact statements featured in those materials, try to get your 2023 impact statements into the database by the end of the year. You could maybe do like early January at the latest, but the team will be digging through the database at the beginning of the year, and we'll start compiling these different prepared materials at that time. But remember, you can input statements anytime throughout the year, and they will still be available in the database for anyone searching or using it. And the writing team will sort of scoop them up and catch them the next calendar year. Let's see, Stacy, do you want to share any additional remarks about the NIDB? And I see that we have a question as well.
Yeah, I've been trying to answer the ones in the chat. I'll give you a minute to read them so that you can add in your answers to them too. Sage, you have your hand up. Did you want to ask a question first? Oh, okay. Well, for those of you who don't know me, and I see a lot of familiar faces here, but my name's Stacy Stearns. I'm the communications specialist with Yukon Extension, and I am our extension inputter on the NIDB, and I'm also the Northeastern representative to the APLU Communications and Marketing Committee, and I'm on the Land Grant Impacts writing team and Sarah's on both of those with me. So we both, she has more years at this than I do, but I've been working on this for quite a few years. From an inputter, state administrator perspective, what I really like about the National Impacts database is that we can put in stories there that don't go into NRS and just get a little bit more traction for them. So for example, all of your FNEP and SNAP-Ed funding has separate reporting portals. And for us, that means that we never include them in our NRS report. But what we can do is take our NRS story and then expand it into a community nutrition story, adding in the FNEP and the SNAP-Ed initiatives, and we can put it into the impacts database. And then it gets some additional traction. We have had people from NIFA Communications and others reach out to us in the past about stories that we've had in the impacts database that they wanted to follow up on, or that they wanted to do some coverage on. So that return has been there for us as a institution, that it gets us a little bit more recognition for the work that our educators are doing. And then for a recent example, one of our research/extension educators and recently did an event and they wanted to do a story on it for our Yukon News page. And we told them that it wasn't really appropriate for the Yukon News page. The event already happened, but they had some really great impacts from this conference that happens every other year. So they're working on a story in this format, and Jess can put it into her PTR, her promotion tenure reappointment package, so she can get that information about the conference out and share it with different audiences. We can do a different story for our extension news page and for our Yukon news pages about it, but it's another avenue for us to put impact data out there. Again, keeping in mind who that audience is. Sarah did come and talk to the communicators, the Northeast communicators in September. We added people from a lot of their institutions to the impacts database after that meeting. So you want to touch base with them if you're not sure who your administrators are. And as Sarah and I are both on that writing team, we are excited to see what the Northeast has in there this year as of December 31st or early January, if absolutely necessary, so that the Northeast is well represented when the writing team meets in February. And Sarah, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Stacy. Yeah, I was trying to catch up with some of the questions in the chat. I think I got to most of them.
Can I see if my mic works now to ask the question?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, great. I'm new to NEMO, so I love this website. You also have the Multistate Research Fund impacts. So I was wondering about the distinction. Oh, I understand the multi-state is only multi-state impacts, but can you confirm that the land grant impacts, are they only from federal funding research, or is it across the board any impacts that a land grant institution from any research project, any funding source might be populating the land grant impacts website? And then just the distinction of how the two websites interact or don't interact.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so the land grant impacts database is for all the different types of projects and programs going on at a land grant university. So that it can be state money, it can be all sorts of different funding. There's even a lovely little other category where you can capture a lot of different things. It's really to show, you know, the scope of work going on at land grant institutions. And that does make it very different from the NIFA reporting portal, which is just NIFA funding. And it does make it different from the work that I do, which only focuses on Hatch multi-state projects. The way that those two are tied together, there's not really a direct link, except for the fact that I am also putting my statements about Hatch multi-state projects into the NIDB. So I post those on my website. I share them in all sorts of different ways. One of the ways that I share them is to upload them to the land grant impacts database, because they are collaborations by land grant institutions. So you will find those in the NIDB. And again, that's kind of one of those things I was saying, it's not that fun to upload an impact statement to a bunch of different places. But I think the more places we can have our work showcased, the better. You know, each of these databases kind of like reaches a different audience, or, you know, your institution website reaches a different audience. I think it's great to, you know, cast a wide, you know, kind of a scatter shot and put our stuff in as many places as possible. And I will say a few, actually we can click over and kind of go through it. Now I was going to actually talk a little bit more about the Multi-State Research Fund Impacts Program. First, here are some quick links to some impact writing resources, some general ones, one for the NRS, the NIFA reporting system, and then some ones for the National Impacts Database. And again, we're recording this, and I'll share my slides, so you guys will get all these links that way as well, if you don't want to write them down. So we can come back to these examples if there is time. But since we're talking about MRF impacts, I wanted to briefly speak about the different materials that I produce and kind of how you all can engage with those. And again, it's not to give you more things to keep track of or more work. But the cool thing is that I have ready-made materials that feature your institutions. So I want to show you those if you're unfamiliar and kind of give you an idea of how you can maybe use those. So the main product I create is a 1 to 2 page stylized impact statement. Sometimes they're even kind of more like infographics. This one's pretty text heavy. But I do ones that are more visual as well. And the first page usually talks about the issue, provides an overview of what was done, and then summarizes the impacts. Then on page 2, I really dive a little bit deeper into the highlights, the specific activities and impacts. Here's kind of a close-up of page 2, and you can see that usually for kind of each of those bullet points, I'm listing which institutions were collaborating on that work. So that means that if your institution is part of a project, if it's part of that impact statement, you could repurpose the whole impact statement and promote the project and your contributions to it that way. Or you could pull out maybe just that bullet point or just that section that talks about your institution. You know, maybe you would want to post it as a web story or share it on social media. Maybe it's a great nugget for you to pull and include in an annual report because it shows ways that your institution is collaborating on kind of these big regional high priority projects. And I think, you know, this can be content that you can quickly kind of grab and share, which is especially helpful if your communications department is a little overstretched. And then you can also find impact statements, or you can find impact statements that feature your institutions in a few different ways. So kind of the first way is that I recommend signing up for our newsletter. It only comes out once a quarter, but I think it's an easy way to see our latest impact statements. I'll show you what that looks like. So here you can see I kind of just summarize the latest impact statements. And then I always list out the participating institutions. So if you see yours featured, again, you kind of have it right there. You can grab that content and share it on your platforms. Another way to find impact statements that feature your institution is our website. The URL is just mrfimpacts.org. If you go to the impact statements page, you can filter by topic, but I think the more useful one for you all is to filter by institution. You can see all the land-grant institutions. And then let's say you want to look at maybe University of Massachusetts. If you click on that, it'll pull up the different impact statements or different projects that feature UMass. So you can see all these different ones. So here's a project on wine grapes. You can see that. If you click the image, it'll pull up the PDF version so that you can download it, print it, whatever you would want to do. And in this example, you can see here on page 2, you can see University of Massachusetts work is featured. All impact statements also include kind of a boilerplate section that will list all of the institutions that are involved. It also has a learn more link where if you need more details about the project or the specific names of the researchers that were involved, it takes you over to the NIMS database where all the multi-state projects live. I also, for recent impact statements, create a little social media toolkit for the project. So if your institution is featured in the impact statement, I'll have kind of already prepared tweets that you can post. Here you can see the one featuring the University of Massachusetts work. So again, something you can just grab that I've prepared that helps me promote the multi-state project, but it also helps you promote the work that your institution is doing. Let me get that presentation. So if that's all kind of a bit too much, a really easy way to sort of follow along or engage is to follow us on social media. Right now we are still using Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. We're also on LinkedIn and Facebook quite a bit. We do have an Instagram, but we've kind of phased that out. It wasn't a great platform for us. And you can engage there and see when I tag your institutions, you can just retweet, share on your platform. Let's see, and then if your institution has stories about work that's in any way supported by the Hatch multi-state funds, even if they're getting, just a little bit of money to support, getting together and meeting, you can share those stories with me and I can promote them on my platforms. You can email those directly to me or you can tag me. So again, that's a way we can kind of synchronize the work that we're doing or coordinate, to make sure that our stories are kind of getting out on all of our different existing platforms. So yeah, that is all I was going to share with you. Hopefully you have a little bit better understanding of impact reporting and maybe a clearer sense of how to engage with the National Land Grant Impacts Database. and MRF impacts. Yeah, I think, it'll help make your impact reporting hopefully a little more efficient and effective, knowing how to leverage resources, to really reinforce our stories and our messages. So,
Thank you,
questions?
Sarah. Thanks. That was great. I know there were a lot of comments in the chat.
Yeah, I'm kind of scrolling
Yeah,
up and
I
trying to
think
find where
most
I
of
left
them,
off.
mostly everything's been answered. I don't know if there's anything that we should talk about with the group. I think it comes to mind that it might be useful if we compile a list of all the Northeast institutions, and if there is a contact that you have in the national database, we can put that next to the institution, and that would be a resource for the NEMO group.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I know you can ask Andrea and Kim for a list of who the currently assigned inputters are. I think I saw a question in the chat kind of about that too. That's something they can pull from the database and send out to you all if you want kind of a snapshot of who's assigned right now.
Right. Yeah, because I'm wondering if I saw some comments from Ruby that she wasn't sure who in Maryland was that she could submit stories to, but it looks like there's already somebody registered with the database. So so as we're preparing, this is the time of year that we're preparing our accomplishment reports for individual Hatch and Hatch Multistate projects. So this is a good time for people to think about any of those projects that have big impact that they might want to highlight. So if they know the right channels or who's available to put that into the system for them, or if they need to register, it's good timing to have this discussed.
Yeah, and like I said, the end of the year is kind of a good target for getting in impact statements. There can be a little bit of trickle over into the first few weeks of January if you want the materials included in those stories and summaries that Stacy and I, the rest of our team, are going to be producing. But please do submit them throughout the year, whenever kind of works with your schedule, your calendar of reporting. They'll still be really useful, and they'll be used in other ways.
Do you have any information on who's using this data?
On the statements, yeah. So, I mean, NIFA is a big user. They also have their NIFA reporting system and things like that, but the communicators really actually like using the land grant impacts database, kind of because it just focuses on those impacts. So they're a big user. APLU is using it a lot to pull out stories for their newsletter, their reports, talking points for their different advocates and folks like that. Yeah, those are probably the two biggest users right now. Since the database has kind of come under new management recently, there's definitely a lot in the works for improvements, sort of generating more buy-in, making it a more complete resource and a more effective tool. And I think that will include a lot more work to promote it as a tool, get kind of a wider audience digging in and using it. And then kind of to follow up on a question in the chat, part of that conversation is how can we then do a better job of tracking how it's being used, maybe how many views or clicks impact statements are getting. How can we get that information back to the inputters and the institutions so that you can see, see that chain and see that it's being used. Right now, that's kind of a broken chain, and we don't do the greatest job at getting back to you and showing you that they've been used. But we are exploring a few different ways of doing that.
Sarah, I'll just add that Faith Peppers, the director of communications for NIFA, told us in one meeting, she has 16 people on her communications staff, and she said that somebody on her staff is in the land-grant impacts every day. And then I do not remember which state, but I remember it was the southern region was telling us at one point that they were at a legislative visit, and one of their carrot reps, and the carrot rep was talking to a legislator, and he asked about some initiative, and they pulled up land grant impacts, filtered for their state, and just handed the laptop to the legislator. And it's like, this is what we're doing. So we have, that anecdotal evidence. And now with the new move to the new management system, we're excited to have some more numbers, as Sarah said, to go behind those. But we know it's being used, and we hope to be able to give concrete information in the future.
Yeah, I think, it's a great tool for showing that collective impact. It's great for tracking what's going on at your institutions, but it's really going to help with regional efforts to be able to show and use all those different filters, kind of like that anecdote described.
Yeah, and I think maybe 5 years ago, was it that recent, even when there was a big push to enter stories into the impact database that was managed by Scott Cummings. It was cumbersome. The login was difficult. And so it's nice that we hear that it's transitioning to a new system. And I just want to let the institutions know that the process is getting easier. So investigate this as a resource and as a tool to help you with your communication efforts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the process, if you've used it before, it's probably going to look pretty similar this year to years past. I don't think we want to change anything too much for this year, since we're so close to kind of the end of the year. Everyone's in there, but probably for the next cycle, hopefully it will be a lot more streamlined and a lot more intuitive and user-friendly. On both ends, for submitting and then for those going in and searching and pulling things out. So we might have to do another training next year if it's kind of a different process. The basics will stay the same. Impact statements are always going to be the same basic outline, same basic principles. So that part won't change, but
I just wanted to chime in for those who are getting in there or are about to get in to submit their stories for the end of the year. I don't know if it's just me, but I have so many problems with adding links and resources to my when I'm adding my land grant, my impact statements. Maybe it's just me, but I've tried different browsers and it's super frustrating. But I've let the team know, they told me they're working on it. But does anybody else have that problem? Is it just me? But it never saves. I just have lots of issues with the current system. So and I've tried, patience. You're trying it out, Sarah.
I was just gonna kind of
do it. I would be so curious because it tells me it saves. It tells me it saves, and then and then when I save and click out and I go back in, almost all the time it does not save. I've just given up and I start putting it in to the body of the text. Yeah, so it says it saves, and then I don't know if it'll let you save the whole thing and close out.
Yeah, maybe I don't want to do that.
Yeah, you don't want to do it. Anyway, I'm just telling people have strength if you run into those sorts of problems.
Yeah, that's an interesting one that I hadn't, as far as I'm aware, I've always seen my resource links come up, but you said you did bring that to APLU's attention, or maybe
I sent an email. Aaron wrote back, but also someone else. I don't remember his name.
Yeah. Okay.
So
yeah. So they'll have it logged then in our list of things that need attention. So yeah, if anything like that ever comes up, yeah, you can send an email to that AgCom's email address, and they will add it to the queue.
Thank you. This was super helpful. Appreciate it.
Very good. Anything else for the good of the cause? I do have, we didn't get to them today, but when I send out the slides, there will be a few examples kind of following that NIDB format, just a few examples of good impact statements, if it would be helpful to kind of have a reference or an example that you can share out to faculty to help them maybe provide you with better material to input. That will be included in the slides.
Great, thank you. We look forward to that.
All right, yeah,
I have a quick question. I may have missed it, but are you planning on coming to NEROC, Sarah?
Yeah,
Okay.
they've invited me to do a very similar presentation. It'll probably be pretty similar to what we've done here, but if there are changes and updates to the NIDB in the in-between time, I'll be sharing those in April. April? I think
April.
Yeah.
7th to the 10th.
Yeah. So I'll be there. Yeah, I think I have an hour to share, and then yeah, I'll be around that day or during the conference to chat impacts at NIDB, whatever anyone wants to chat about, maybe other things too.
Great. Yeah, we're gonna have a table for Ag Innovation at NEROC where we'll have some swag stuff out, and it'll be in a pretty central location. So if you ever want to join us there, you're welcome to
Yeah,
field questions and everything. We'll try to have somebody there most of the time if we can.
yeah, sounds good. I'll probably touch base with you on that.
Great. Thank you for joining us today, both Sarah and Stacy. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Good luck with all your impact reporting.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Oh, that's great. So should we stop recording so that we can